This out with something completely non-political at all, with a brief poll. How many of you have heard of or watched the TV show Mythbusters? Anyone? Yes. Excellent, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, now how many of you have heard a statement along the lines of, "What is happening to the youth of America?" Or maybe following up with, "There are no young conservatives who care about what's happening in America," right? Well, I'm Laura Fennig, but I like to think of myself as the living, breathing Mythbusters. I'm 23 years old, and I care about what happens to America. And I'm so thankful for you guys who have been out there on the front lines for years fighting to protect our future and making sure that my generation and my kids and my grandkids are able to enjoy the same America that we do. So I'm originally from Indiana. I grew up literally in the middle of a cornfield. My dad is a farmer. He grows corn and beans. But then when I went to college, I moved out to the East Coast to Virginia, which is where I'm living now, and attended Patrick Henry College. Now, if you want to talk about more young, motivated, conservative people, there's a whole pack of them there who are studying our founding principles, who are studying philosophy. Constitutional law is required for anyone who goes there. They're learning about what the founders are actually talking about, and they're ready to go out and do something about it. So briefly after I graduated, Michael Ferris, who is the founder of that school, brought me on board with the Convention of States project to help out, and I'm so excited to be here to talk to you a little bit more about what we're actually doing there. So I'm just going to actually try to break it down a little bit for you, because I know that a lot of people like to talk in abstracts, that's a word, about how we can save America. We've got to do something, and what I'm excited to see is that there are so many of you who are ready to do something. I get calls from all over the country from people who are excited to get on board. They want to do something. They're like, "Laura, what's the first step? Let's get this going, let's get rolling," and that's what we're here to do. So I want to tell you a little bit about the structure that we're going to use to make it happen. But first of all, kind of the big picture. So we were founded, as Pam mentioned, by Citizens for Self-Governance, which was founded by Mark Meckler, who's the president there, and he also, as she mentioned, helped found Tea Party Patriots back in the day. And Michael Ferris, who is the head of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. He's a constitutional lawyer. He was one of the last attorneys to argue before the Supreme Court on Article 5, and he won, by the way. He's our advisor down in the office. He kind of helps give us some guidance on where we need to be going with the project. But they got together and they saw the problem that we all see today. The federal government is running away, and we got to do something to stop them, right? Now, our goal is to urge and empower state legislators to call a convention of states to propose amendments to the Constitution to curb the abuses of federal power, the federal government. That's what we're about. All right, so a little bit about where we've been so far. Pam talked about this a little bit. Mark Levin published the Liberty Amendments. The first day it was published, it was at the top of the bestseller list on Amazon across all books, not even just political books. So that kind of gives you an idea about the interest that's being generated around the country and the discussion that we're starting to see about this. On August 7th, that was when we announced the release of the Convention of States project. So Michael Ferris, Mark Meckler, as well as Rob Nadelson, who's a professor and is one of the most foremost scholars on Article 5 in the country. We're there talking about what Article 5 is, what a Convention of States is, and what we need to do to make it happen. They announced the release of that there with 200 legislators and coalitions leaders, and we had a really positive response from that. It was one of the most well-attended breakouts at that session in the entire history of that convention. And a lot of them were saying that this was one of the best workshops we've had. They were really excited to get going. So since then, Michael Ferris appeared on the Mike Huckabee Show on Fox. After that's released, we got over 25,000 hits on our website, which we had just released. We had over 11,000 volunteers sign up to get more involved in the project, and that was just the beginning. Since then, we've got over 100 applications from all over the country from volunteers who are ready to get in leadership position. We've appointed about a dozen or more leaders in different states around the country who are ready to start getting the ball rolling there. They're looking for a lot of volunteer support, because this is going to be a movement of the grassroots. We need the people out there supporting and telling their legislators that this is something that we want. So about Article 5, there are two different methods in Article 5. This is kind of the nutshell of the project. There are two different methods that you can use to propose amendments to the Constitution. The first method is the one that we most commonly see. It's the only one that's actually been used so far. Amendments are proposed by 2/3 of Congress. Then they're sent to the states to be ratified. You have to have 3/4 of the state legislators. Or they can be ratified by conventions in 3/4 of the states. So far, all of the amendments that have been added to the Constitution have been the first method. So proposed by Congress, then sent to the state legislators and ratified there, except for, I believe it was the 21st Amendment was sent to the conventions in states and were ratified that way. Now, the second method is what we're talking about here, and that is amendments are proposed by a convention of states that is called at the request of 2/3 of state legislators, and then the amendments that are proposed out of that convention are then sent, just like the ones that are proposed from Congress, to either be ratified by 3/4 of states legislators or ratified by conventions in 3/4 of the states. So same process, except that the amendments are being proposed by the states instead of the Congress. All right, so the specific process for doing it with a convention of states, the first step is you have to have 34 states submit applications on the same issue. So far, there have been a lot of different organizations that have tried to do similar things. Most of them were calling it for one specific amendment. Some states have been able to submit applications, but they never reached the amount that they needed. So they never got 34 states, and that's why we haven't seen one yet so far. The second step, once they receive 34 applications, is Congress is required to call the convention. Now, I think you'll all be very glad to hear that this is the only role that the federal government is able to play in this. Congress can call, they're required to call the convention, they set the time and the location, and that's it. From there, it's the states that are working to add these amendments to the Constitution. So then the third step is commissioners will be sent to the Convention of States to discuss, propose, and vote on possible amendments. Now, commissioners are chosen from the states. They can be selected in any manner that that state deems best. So they can send one, they can send 3, they can send 50, 100, it doesn't matter. Each state will only be given one vote, though. So that's kind of how that will work. So then the proposed amendments that are discussed in the convention are sent to the states for ratification. And then, as we already said, you have to have 38 states to ratify. The proposed amendments will then become part of the Constitution. So the two numbers are 34 states to call for a convention of states and 38 states to ratify. Okay, so the reason this was all put in, I'm sure you all are pretty familiar with how the Constitution was adopted. I know that's a lot of our passion in this room. But the founders put this in there because they knew that the federal government would very well run away with its power. We've seen this throughout all of history. Whenever someone comes into power and has a lot of power, they like to get more power, and so they add to the power, and no one who has that power is going to take the power away from themselves, right? That just makes sense. When something is broken, it's not going to fix itself. Something has to come in and help it, right? So so what we're doing here, Mason was the founder who realized this, that they originally didn't have the second part of Amendment 5, or Article 5 in the Constitution, but he recognized the fact that there would probably one day be a time when the federal government would be run away with its power, and we would need to have some way to check that power by the states. And so that's why they added that second way where states could come in and check the federal government, and that's the Second Amendment process. All right, so how our proposal is different from the other ones that you may have heard of so far. There are two different things that kind of set us apart. The first one is that we are calling a convention for a particular topic instead of a particular amendment. So there are a lot of different groups out there who have worked in the past to try to call a convention of states for one particular amendment that they would like to see addressed. Now, what we believe is that we have a problem in America that's much bigger than one particular amendment. And so in order to be able to address this large problem that we see, we think it's going to require a large solution. So we think there's going to be multiple amendments that we need to address. So we're calling for the topic would be to call a convention for the purpose of limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. So then anything that falls under that topic could be discussed. So if it's a budget balance or a balanced budget amendment, which I think most of us would be in favor of, or term limits or any of those other things that have been discussed, that could all take place at this convention. So in another sense, like a lot of the people who have been talking here today, this is a way that we can all come together as conservatives who want to see things change and bring all those groups together and actually see some real difference made here. And it doesn't have to be just conservatives. There are people from both sides of the aisle, I think, who would be able to benefit from this. So we want to draw as many of those groups together as we can that would fall under this topic. So we're looking to create a complete package of restraints here. So the second goal is that we are going to be building a strong grassroots support for this. This is something that actually hasn't been done very much of in this arena in the Article 5 kind of debate so far. So we want to get everyone's support in all the states. We're organizing our grassroots. That's what I've been working on a lot of, which has been super exciting to see it start to develop and everything. But we want to build a political operation in a minimum of 40 states. Because it takes 38 to ratify, we'd like at least 40 to make sure that we kind of have that cushion, and we're going to be working on all 50 though. Those are just kind of going to be our focus states. So now, time to talk about the grassroots, the best part of this, right? Alrighty. Okay, so the organization, we've already discussed the leaders. We have the people. We have Mark Meckler and Michael Ferris, who have been involved in grassroots organization for years, and they have been extremely successful thus far. So we're excited to have them on board, who are really kind of giving us some guidance on how we can build this. And we're going to be looking a lot to people like you, to Tea Party, or people who are ready to stand up and take action and are tired of seeing the federal government step on the state's toes. It's great. I think one of the best parts of my job is actually getting to just talk to a bunch of people on the phone all the time, people who are excited to do things. One of the ladies I talked to was a school teacher in New York City. Her husband works on the fire, he was on the New York fire, what's the word? Team, whatever, you know what I'm saying. I'm not thinking, apparently. But she told me that one of her favorite parts of her job was getting to teach students to do something instead of just sitting around and complaining. Apparently one time she had a student come up to her and they were just, the food in our cafeteria is so awful, I hate it, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, well, what are you going to do about it? So that kid apparently eventually actually went to the proper authorities, told them what was happening, and actually got it changed. So she was very excited to see that kind of thing happen, and I thought that was a really good example, because that's what we have today. We have a lot of people who see what's wrong, and they say, I don't like this in the federal government, I don't like that. Well, this is the way that we can take action and actually do something about it. So this is really empowering, right? I know when I was in school, I loved it because we got to talk a lot about our founding principles and about ideals and about things that we wanted to see in our country, which I loved, and I wanted to see that happen, but it was kind of sad because I thought, what can I do, really? I mean, I've seen people work a lot in this, and what progress has been made, I don't know. I was a little bit depressed about it, I guess, and was kind of about ready to write it off. But this is the way that we can actually take action and that we can empower people to make a real difference. And that's what grassroots are. You guys know that because you've been doing that for years, and that's what we're looking to do here. So success is going to depend on the American citizens, as it does for any successful movement like this. So the plan is to form a viable political operation in at least 40 states, as I already said. Within those, there are 4,000 state house districts. We want to make sure that we have operations in at least 3,000 of those. My goal, I want to see all 4,000 with operations, but all right, we'll say 3,000 for now. 3,000 district captains then will be in place in each of those districts to help organize within there. So we'll have one district captain for each state house legislative district, and they're going to be recruiting 100 volunteers underneath them who are going to be there to be calling their state representatives, who are going to be taking those actions to really show their support. So on our national or on the state leadership then, Above them, we'll have 3 statewide leaders. We're going to have a state director, legislative liaison, and coalitions director, which this chart kind of explains how it's organized a little bit. So at the top, the Convention of States Grassroots Coordinators, that's kind of where I fall in. Then at the state level, the state director, legislative liaison, coalitions director, and then the state director will be down here kind of helping empower those district captains to go out and recruit their 100 volunteers. And then the volunteers will be under there. So to talk a little bit about kind of what some of the responsibilities might look like with some of those positions. The district captains, as I already said, will be having 1 per state house legislative district, and their main goal is really just going to be to get out there and educate their communities. Tell them what a convention of states is about, explain Article 5 to them, answer their questions, because a lot of people don't know what Article 5 is. Or if they do, they don't know what it says. I know I had read the Constitution and I didn't realize what it was actually saying until someone explained it to me. So we want people out there who can do that for these people. Then once we educate them, we want to inspire them and tell them how they can join the movement and really make this a reality. So educating and recruiting more volunteers to sign up. Then the state director is kind of going to be, I kind of consider them the main manager for the state. So their main responsibility is managing the district captains, so helping train and recruit those people, as well as being a resource to these state leaders. So the other 2, the coalitions director and legislative liaison, will be kind of tag teaming with them, letting them know what's going on. So we really have at least 1 person in the state where we can kind of ask, hey, how's it going? And they can explain to us everything that's happening around the state. So that's one aspect, is the management side. The other side is more just being the face of Convention of States in the state. So doing a lot more of that leadership, helping build the statewide strategy by meeting with our other statewide leaders and figuring out what are the steps that we need to take to make this successful. Because we really do think that those people within the states are going to know how to bring in their community members better than we will. So we want to leave that. We want to put as much of the leadership on the actual states as possible, because that's what we're about, right? Empowering grassroots people, empowering the people in the states to really be able to use their knowledge of their people around them to benefit the movement. So they're going to be helping build those strategy, looking for opportunities across the state where we can be presenting a convention of states and representing us there. And the coalitions director is kind of the PR person. So they're going to be building a lot of relationships with statewide organizations and coalitions. We want to make this a movement of all of these groups coming together to make this happen. So we want to partner with you guys who are leaders in this arena. We want to partner with all the other different groups in the communities and see how we can work together to really make this a reality. So that's going to be their main strategizing, is going to be going around the states, finding those other leaders, helping connect with them and connecting their people with the movement, and doing as much as we can there. So building those relationships, but also, again, they're kind of like the district captains in that they do a lot of educating, a lot of talking to people about the movement, and then a lot of recruiting as well. Then the legislative liaison. We would like this person ideally to be located more closely to the state capitol, because they're going to be building relationships with our legislative members or representatives. So they're going to be in there doing a lot of talking to those people. We'd like to have a legislative sponsor in each state where they can kind of be a go-to person for them, and then do a lot of just talking to those representatives, seeing where they're at, figuring out who's for us, who's against us, who do we need to have more people calling, who do we need people to be showing up in their office, how can we support them, because that's what this is about. We want that person to be connecting our grassroots with our leadership in the state governments so that they can really hear the voice of the people and more accurately reflect that in the way that they're voting. So they're really going to be building those relationships there, and then they'll be bringing those volunteers and connecting them with that leadership. So again, that's kind of how it's looking as far as hierarchy. But how you can help. This is the question I get the most, is people who are ready to take action, they want to know the next step. So the first way you can help is pretty obvious. Join our team. We need leaders. I know in Washington State, I'm still looking for statewide leaders, so if you're interested in any of those positions that I've talked about, come talk to me. Or if you know someone else that you think would be great for that, we want to know who those people are, and you guys are the people who know those people. So please help us out in that way if you can. We also need volunteers. We need people who are going to be down there calling their representatives, who are willing to show up to those legislative hearings, because that's what what, just like Pam said, that's what our opposition does well. They know how to organize their people, and you better believe it that when something comes up, they're going to have at least 10, 20 people there. Well, we're going to have 100, 200 people there, and they aren't going to be able to say no to us because we'll have an overwhelming support there, right? Okay, so that's what we want. We want people who are going to be joining our teams, people who are going to be calling, people who are going to show up at the legislative hearings and are ready to take action. So we'll let them know when the time is coming, so it's not a full-time job. This doesn't require you to stop everything else you're doing. You can join in any way you really want to. We also, of course, want you to be educating your circles, talking to your friends, talking to the people in your groups that you're leaders of, and doing as much of that as you can. Of course, always welcome donations, who doesn't? But I won't go on there because you know. If you would like any more information though, our website is a great resource. It's www.conventionofstates.com. Me and Pam will also be at our table back there, so feel free to come over and ask us any questions that you have. We'd love to answer those for you. We also would love for you to sign up there. We have things there where you can give us your email address and we'll connect with you with more information. But you can also apply for any of the leadership positions online. So if you go to our website, all those resources are there for you as well. But we'd love to talk to you. So come by the booth and we'll answer any questions you have. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.